I ruined a wedding because the bride told everyone I was a homewrecker in love with the groom. When I was 5, my neighbor Bella became my best friend. We grew up inseparable. In college, I hooked up with Barrett a few times. Fun, but no chemistry. We stayed friends. Senior year, I introduced Bella to Barrett. Love at first sight for her. She was upset about our history, but I assured her it meant nothing. They started dating. After graduation, I moved 6 hours away. Last Christmas, Barrett proposed. Bella kept saying I'd be maid of honor. Then she ghosted me for months. When I finally reached her, she said I couldn't be in the wedding. I lived too far away. Her cousin would be maid of honor instead, the cousin she hates. I saw on social media she had an engagement party, wasn't invited. 6 weeks before the wedding, Bella called. A bridesmaid dropped out. Could I fill in? We're doing a reverse color palette, all bridesmaids in white, Barrett and I in black. I sent her a photo of my white slip dress. She approved it, gave a thumbs up. Wedding day. I arrived at 8 a.m. for hair and makeup. Having fun, feeling close to Bella again. 2 hours before the ceremony, she told us to get dressed. I changed in the bathroom. When I returned, every bridesmaid was in blue. I was the only one in white. Bella said to her cousin, I told you she'd do something like this. The cousin screamed that I was jealous, in love with Barrett, completely unhinged. I froze. Then the photographer burst in. We need the bride in white now. I'm not wearing white, Bella said calmly. She is. Everyone stared at me. Security, Bella called out. 2 men entered. Escort her out. Bella, you told me. I have the texts, she announced to the room, where I specifically said blue. She changed it to white in the screenshots she's probably showing people. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking to show the messages. They were gone. Our entire conversation thread, deleted. Check your phone records, her cousin suggested. Prove the call happened. I looked. No record of our 6-week-ago call existed. This is insane. Bella, why? Because you slept with my fiancé last month, she said loudly. The room gasped. What? I haven't even been in town. Barrett confessed everything. How you came to visit, seduced him, said you'd always loved him. That's a lie. I haven't seen Barrett since Christmas. Barrett walked in then, saw me in white, and his face went pale. Oh my God, she actually wore it. Bella, maybe we should. See? Bella pointed. He's traumatized just seeing her. I looked at Barrett desperately. Tell them the truth. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry for what happened between us. But today is about Bella. Security grabbed my arms. Wait! My mom's voice. She'd been outside, heard the commotion. My daughter has been with me every weekend for the past 2 months. When exactly did this affair happen? She visited secretly, Bella said. Barrett has receipts, hotel records. Show them, I demanded. Bella pulled out papers. A hotel receipt with my name, last month's date. That's impossible. Your credit card was used, she said. I grabbed the receipt. It was my card number. But the signature. This isn't my signature. Denial, the cousin muttered. My dad entered. What's going on? Your daughter tried to destroy my wedding, Bella said. Just like she destroyed my life in college. What are you talking about? She slept with my high school boyfriend when I brought him to visit her at college. That's why we broke up. Bella, you didn't have a boyfriend in high school. You dated Jim freshman year of college. Stop gaslighting me. I noticed something then. Barrett's groomsmen were recording everything on their phones. This was planned. They were creating evidence. Why are they filming? For the lawsuit, Bella said casually. Defamation, emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional distress. My lawyer said to document everything. Your lawyer? My uncle. He's here, actually. She pointed to a man in the corner taking notes. This wasn't just humiliation. It was a legal trap. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I looked down. Check Barrett's phone. Emergency contact list. I looked up at Barrett. Show everyone your emergency contact list. What? No. If you have nothing to hide, show them who your emergency contact is. Bella grabbed his phone. I'll show them. She stopped. Her face changed. Who's Emma? She asked quietly. Barrett went white. She's a coworker. Listed as your wife? The room went silent. It's a mistake. Bella scrolled. These texts. Can't wait to see you after the honeymoon. Love you, husband. Barrett lunged for the phone. Bella, I can explain. You're married? My mom stepped forward. I think we should all calm down. Wait, I said, something clicking. Bella, check when they got married. She looked. Her face crumbled. 6 months ago, before you proposed to me. Barrett's best man, Tom, stepped forward. Actually, there's something else you should know. Everyone turned to him. Emma isn't just his wife. She's Bella's therapist, the one who's been treating her for paranoid delusions about her best friend. Bella dropped the phone. My therapist? Married my fiancé? Tom nodded. And there's more. Check your medication, Bella. The anxiety meds she prescribed? They're not anxiety meds. What are they? Hormones. She's been drugging you, making you paranoid, erratic, setting you up to look crazy for the divorce proceedings. Divorce? We're not even married yet. You are, Tom said. Barrett filed paperwork 6 weeks ago. Forged your signature. You've been legally married while he's been married to Emma. It's bigamy. And with your mental health issues documented by his wife, the therapist, he gets everything in the divorce. Bella collapsed. But Tom wasn't done. There's one more thing. Emma isn't really Emma. She's Isabel Harley, Barrett's sister. I stand frozen in the bridesmaid's room as Tom's words echo in my head. Isabel Harley is Barrett's sister, and this whole thing was planned. Bella collapses into a chair, her face completely blank like her brain just shut down to protect itself. The wedding guests outside are starting to whisper loudly enough that we can hear the rumble of confusion through the walls. My hands are shaking, so hard I have to clench them into fists. The photographer is still holding his camera up, still recording, and I want to grab it and smash it against the wall. But I can't move. My legs feel like they're made of concrete. Bella's cousin is backing toward the door, her face white, like she's finally realizing she was part of something bigger than just wedding drama. The other bridesmaids are huddled together near the makeup station, whispering and staring at their phones. Someone's probably already posting about this on social media. My mom pushes through the crowd of bridesmaids and immediately takes charge, telling everyone except family to leave the room. Her voice is sharp and commanding in a way I haven't heard since I was a kid getting in trouble. She kneels next to Bella and speaks softly to her, but Bella just stares at the wall like she's watching something none of us can see. My dad appears in the doorway and locks eyes with me, and I can see he's already shifted into protection mode. His jaw is set in that way it gets when he's angry but trying to stay calm. He walks over to me and puts his hand on my shoulder, squeezing once. The bridesmaids start filing out, some of them giving me sympathetic looks, others avoiding my eyes completely. Bella's cousin lingers by the door, opening her mouth like she wants to say something, but my mom gives her a look that could freeze fire, and she leaves. The door clicks shut behind the last person, and suddenly the room feels too quiet. I can hear Bella breathing, these shallow little gasps like she can't get enough air. My mom is still kneeling next to her, one hand on Bella's back, rubbing small circles. Barrett tries to approach Bella, but Tom physically blocks him while the other groomsmen look completely lost about whose side to take. Tom is bigger than Barrett, broader in the shoulders, and he plants himself between them like a wall. Barrett's face is pale and sweaty, and he keeps saying he can explain over and over, but the words sound hollow even to him. His hands are shaking worse than mine. One of the groomsmen, a guy I remember from college named Chris, takes a step toward Tom like he's going to back Barrett up, but then he stops and looks at Barrett's face and seems to change his mind. The photographer is still recording everything, and I realize this whole nightmare is being documented in real time. Every awful moment is being captured on video. Part of me is glad because it's proof, but another part of me wants to hide my face and pretend this isn't happening. Barrett tries to move around Tom, reaching for Bella, and Tom shoves him back. Not hard, but firm enough to make a point. Barrett stumbles a little and catches himself on the edge of a table. The makeup brushes rattle in their containers. Security finally clears the room of everyone except immediate family, and the wedding coordinator is outside trying to figure out what to tell the 100 guests waiting for a ceremony. I can hear her voice through the door, high and stressed, saying something about a delay. The groomsmen file out, Chris giving Barrett one last confused look before leaving. Tom stays. My parents stay. Bella's parents aren't here, I realize. They're probably still out in the ceremony space with all the guests, completely unaware that their daughter's wedding just exploded. I sit down next to Bella and take her hand, which is ice cold and limp. Her fingers don't curl around mine. She doesn't react at all. She turns to look at me for the first time since Tom's revelation, and whispers that she tried to tell me she didn't sleep with him, and she didn't believe me. Her voice is so quiet I almost don't hear it. There are tears on her cheeks, but she's not crying now, just staring at me with this broken look that makes my chest hurt. I squeeze her hand and tell her it's okay. We'll figure this out. But the words feel stupid even as I'm saying them. Nothing about this is okay. My mom asks Tom to explain everything he knows, and he reveals that Isabel has done this before. Created fake identities, targeted vulnerable women, manipulated them through fake therapy. Barrett was involved each time, playing the role of devoted boyfriend while his sister systematically destroyed these women's support systems and drained their resources. Tom's own sister was a victim 3 years ago, which is why he finally decided to expose them today. His voice cracks when he talks about his sister. He says her name is May, and she still can't work full-time because of what they did to her. She lost her job, her apartment, most of her friends. Isabel convinced her she was having a mental breakdown and needed to be hospitalized. By the time May figured out what was happening, they'd taken almost everything. Tom says he's been watching Barrett ever since, waiting for him to do it again. When Barrett asked him to be best man, Tom knew he had to stop it this time. He spent months trying to gather proof, but Isabel is careful. She covers her tracks. The wedding day was his last chance to save Bella before it was too late. Barrett is crying now, these ugly, choking sobs, saying Tom doesn't understand, that Isabel made him do it. My dad moves to stand between Tom and Barrett, his arms crossed. He asks Tom if he has any proof of these other victims, and Tom pulls out his phone. Shows us screenshots of conversations with his sister, medical records, bank statements. Everything is dated from 3 years ago. The hotel manager appears with 2 police officers who were attending a different event in the building, and suddenly this stops being just personal drama and becomes an official incident. The officers are in full uniform, radios crackling on their shoulders. One of them is older, maybe 50, with gray hair and tired eyes. The other is younger, a woman with her hair pulled back tight. Detective Khalid Albright introduces himself and asks if anyone wants to file a report. He's the older one. His voice is calm and professional, like he deals with wedding disasters every weekend. I watch Bella's face carefully, knowing this decision has to be hers, but she's still too shocked to process what's being asked. She's staring at the detective like she doesn't understand the words coming out of his mouth. My mom is still rubbing her back in those small circles. I make the decision to speak first and tell Detective Albright about the forged hotel receipts, the deleted text messages, and the false accusations against me. My voice shakes as I explain how I was set up to look like I was having an affair with Barrett and sabotaging the wedding. The detective takes notes in a small notebook, his pen moving fast across the page. He asks if I have any proof, and I realize I deleted the approved white dress photo from my phone in panic earlier. I check my phone anyway, scrolling through my photos, but it's gone. I deleted it right after Bella showed everyone those fake texts, thinking it didn't matter anymore. My hands are shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. The detective asks if I have the text conversation itself, and I show him my messages with Bella. The entire thread from 6 weeks ago is just gone. Vanished like it never existed. My dad, who's been quietly observing everything, suddenly speaks up and says he has security camera footage from our house showing I never left town last month when the alleged affair supposedly happened. He installed cameras 6 months ago after a neighborhood break-in, and he can prove I was home every night. His voice is steady and certain. Detective Albright asks him to preserve that footage immediately as evidence. My dad pulls out his phone and starts doing something with an app, probably backing up the files. He tells the detective he can email the footage within an hour. Barrett is still crying, now sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. The younger officer, the woman, goes over to him and asks if he needs medical attention. He shakes his head but doesn't look up. Isabel herself arrives at the venue, walking in like she owns the place, dressed professionally and carrying a leather portfolio. She looks at the chaos with this calm, almost amused expression, and introduces herself to the detective as Dr. Emma Harley, Bella's treating psychiatrist. Her voice is smooth and confident. She's wearing a gray suit and heels, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looks like every professional therapist you'd see in a movie. She explains that Bella has been experiencing a psychotic break, and that today's accusations are part of her delusional system. She says it so calmly, like she's discussing the weather. She nods sympathetically at Bella, who flinches when she sees her. I watch Isabel work the room with practiced ease, speaking in this soothing professional tone about Bella's deteriorating mental health and paranoid ideation about her fiancé and best friend. She pulls out official-looking documents from her portfolio. Therapy notes, medication records, psychiatric evaluations, all painting Bella as severely mentally ill. She hands them to Detective Albright, who starts reading through them. The detective's expression shifts from sympathetic to skeptical as he looks at Bella, who's still sitting silently. Isabel keeps talking, explaining treatment plans and medication adjustments and crisis intervention strategies. She uses all these medical terms that sound impressive and official. She says Bella has been deteriorating for months despite intensive treatment, that she's been having delusions about her best friend trying to steal her fiancé, that the wedding stress triggered a complete break from reality. My mom stands up then, her face red, and gets right in Isabel's space. Tom steps forward before Isabel can say another word and tells Detective Albright to check her credentials because her real name is Isabel Harley, not Emma, and she's Barrett's biological sister. The room goes completely silent. Isabel doesn't even flinch. She just smiles sadly and looks at Tom with this pitying expression that makes my skin crawl. She explains that this is exactly the kind of conspiracy theory Bella has been developing, and now it's spreading to others in the bridal party. She suggests that the stress of the wedding has triggered some kind of mass hysteria among everyone here. Her voice stays calm and professional, like she's diagnosing us all right now. My mom, who's been getting angrier by the second watching Isabel perform, stands up and gets right in Isabel's face. She tells her to stop lying and admit what she's done to Bella. My mom's voice is shaking but loud, and I can see her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Isabel maintains her calm facade, but I notice her jaw tighten, just for a second, the first crack in her performance. She tells my mom that she understands emotions are running high, but making threats against a medical professional could have legal consequences. She says it so smoothly, like she's done this before, turning herself into the victim. Bella speaks for the first time in 20 minutes. Her voice is quiet but steady, and everyone turns to look at her. She asks Isabel about the medication she prescribed 3 months ago. Isabel smoothly responds that it's a standard anti-anxiety medication to help with wedding stress. Nothing unusual about it. Bella nods slowly, and then asks why the pills are blue when the pharmacy label says they should be white. She asks why they make her feel disconnected from reality instead of calmer, why she can't trust her own thoughts when she takes them. The question hangs in the air, and I see Isabel's mask slip for just a second before she recovers. She explains that medication can look different depending on the manufacturer, and that feeling disconnected might mean they need to adjust the dosage. But Bella keeps staring at her with this new clarity in her eyes, like she's seeing Isabel properly for the first time. Detective Albright asks to see Bella's medication bottles. My mom immediately offers to drive to Bella's apartment to get them. Isabel tries to say that's not necessary, and she can provide samples from her office right now, but the detective says he'd prefer the actual prescribed bottles from Bella's home. I volunteer to go with my mom before Isabel can say anything else. I'm suddenly afraid that evidence might disappear if we don't move fast, that Isabel has people who could get to Bella's apartment before we do. Barrett finally speaks up. His voice is cracking, and he looks at Isabel with this desperate expression. He says that maybe they should just tell everyone the truth. Isabel's head whips toward him with a look of pure fury that she doesn't bother hiding anymore. I realize that Barrett might actually be more afraid of his sister than he is of going to jail. He takes a step back from her, and Tom moves to stand between them. My mom grabs my arm, and we head for the exit. My mom and I race to Bella's apartment in her car. I'm shaking so hard I can barely hold my phone. I call Sarah Gupta, a lawyer my dad knows who handles fraud cases, and leave a frantic voicemail explaining what's happening at the wedding venue. We get to Bella's place, and I use the spare key she gave me years ago when we were still close. The apartment feels creepy now, knowing what Barrett and Isabel were planning here, like the walls themselves watched Bella being manipulated. We find 3 prescription bottles in Bella's medicine cabinet, all from the same pharmacy but prescribed by Dr. Emma Harley. My mom takes photos of everything before we touch anything. She carefully bags the bottles in Ziploc bags from Bella's kitchen. I notice Bella's laptop open on her desk and grab that too, thinking there might be therapy session recordings or emails that could be evidence. When we get back to the venue, Detective Albright has separated everyone into different rooms for individual statements. Isabel is in one room with another officer, looking perfectly composed and professional again. Barrett is alone in a corner looking like he might throw up. Tom is giving his statement about his sister's experience with this same scheme 3 years ago. The detective takes the medication bottles from my mom and says he'll send them for analysis, but that could take weeks. My mom, who used to be a nurse before she became a teacher, asks if she can look at them first. She examines the pills carefully and then pulls up photos on her phone of what that medication is supposed to look like. The pills in Bella's bottles are completely different, a different color and different shape. She shows the detective, and his expression changes from skeptical to serious. Sarah shows up at 8:15 p.m., this tiny woman with gray hair pulled back tight and these sharp eyes that seem to take in everything at once. She's wearing jeans and a sweater like she literally just left dinner and drove straight here. She shakes my hand firmly and then immediately starts organizing, pulling out a legal pad and pen from her purse. She tells me we need to write everything down while it's still fresh in my mind, every single interaction with Bella and Barrett and Isabel for the past year. She hands me the pad and says to start from the beginning, when Bella first mentioned the engagement. My hand is shaking as I write, and the words keep blurring together because I'm exhausted and overwhelmed, but I force myself to focus. I write about the ghosting, the phone call 6 weeks ago, the text about the white dress. Sarah reads over my shoulder and asks questions, making me add details I didn't think were important. She wants to know exact dates, exact times, who else was present, what the weather was like. Everything. My dad appears next to me while I'm writing and taps my shoulder. He shows me his phone with this grainy black and white video playing. I squint at it and realize it's our mailbox, the camera angle from our front porch security system. The timestamp says 3:17 a.m. from 2 months ago. A figure approaches the mailbox, someone wearing dark clothes and a hood. The person opens the mailbox and takes something out, then walks away quickly. My dad zooms in on the figure, and even though the video quality is bad, you can clearly see it's a woman with Isabel's height and build. Her hair is visible under the hood, the same length as Isabel's. My stomach drops as I understand what I'm seeing. That's how she got my credit card number. She stole my statement right out of the mailbox. Sarah leans in to watch the video and her eyes light up. She asks my dad to send her that footage immediately, and to not delete it from his phone or the security system under any circumstances. Sarah takes my phone and pulls up my banking app, asking for my login. I give it to her and she navigates to my credit card statements, scrolling through the past few months. There, from last month, is a charge for 3 nights at the Riverside Inn, 2 hours away. The same hotel from the forged receipt Isabel showed everyone. The charge is for $600. I never made that charge. I've never even heard of that hotel. Sarah takes screenshots of everything and then calls the credit card company's fraud line right there. She puts it on speaker and talks to the representative, explaining that there are fraudulent charges on my account. The rep asks some security questions and then confirms that yes, the card was used in person at that hotel. Someone had a physical card with my number on it, not just the number itself. That means they either stole my actual card temporarily, or they made a duplicate, which requires special equipment. Sarah thanks the rep and hangs up, then looks at me with this intense expression. She says this proves sophisticated planning, not just a crime of opportunity. This was premeditated fraud. Tom finds me around 10 p.m. when things have calmed down slightly. Most of the guests have left and the venue staff is cleaning up the chaos. He asks if we can talk privately, and I follow him outside into the garden area, where white string lights are hanging from trees. It's finally quiet out here, just crickets and the distant sound of traffic. Tom sits on a bench and I sit next to him, waiting. He takes a deep breath and tells me about his sister May. 3 years ago, she met Barrett at a coffee shop. He was charming, attentive, everything she'd been looking for. A few weeks into dating, he suggested she see a therapist to work through some family issues she'd mentioned. He recommended someone, a Dr. Emma Harley. May started therapy and everything seemed great at first. But then the therapist started changing her medications, making her feel paranoid and disconnected. She started fighting with her family, pushing away her friends. Barrett was there through it all, supportive and loving. Then one day, May's bank accounts were empty. Her savings, her inheritance from their grandmother, everything was gone. Barrett disappeared. The therapist disappeared. May tried to report it to police, but all the documentation made her look mentally unstable. The therapist had records showing May was delusional, paranoid, a danger to herself. Without other victims to establish a pattern, it was her word against a licensed professional. Tom says May never recovered. Not really. She lives with their parents now and can barely hold down a part-time job. The psychological damage was worse than the financial loss. I asked Tom why he didn't warn Bella months ago when he first suspected Barrett was doing this again. He looks down at his hands, ashamed. He says he tried to investigate first, to get proof. He followed Barrett, searched online, tried to find other victims. But Isabel is careful. She uses different names, different locations, covers her tracks. He hoped maybe Barrett had changed, that maybe he'd broken free from his sister's control. But as the wedding got closer, Tom saw the same pattern emerging. Bella was becoming paranoid, isolated, unstable. The wedding day revelation was his last option to stop them before Bella got legally trapped in whatever scheme they had planned. He apologizes for not acting sooner, and I can see he genuinely feels guilty. I tell him I understand, that at least he stopped it before it was too late. Tom pulls out his phone and shows me his sister's contact information. He says May is willing to talk to me if I want to hear her story directly. She wants to help stop Isabel from doing this to anyone else. I save the number in my phone and feel this wave of determination wash over me. If there are multiple victims, we can prove this is a pattern, not just a one-time thing. That makes it so much harder for Isabel to claim innocence or blame it on misunderstandings. Tom warns me that talking about it is still hard for May, that she's fragile, but she's ready to do whatever it takes to get justice. I thank him for trusting me with this information and for having the courage to expose everything today. He just nods and says he should have done it sooner. Back inside, Detective Albright pulls Sarah and me aside to give us an update. Isabel is refusing to answer any more questions without her lawyer present, which Sarah says is actually a good sign. She explains that innocent people usually want to clear their name immediately, while guilty people lawyer up. Barrett is a different story. He's been giving statements for the past hour, and they're rambling, contradictory, falling apart. The detective says Barrett keeps changing his story, first claiming he didn't know about the medication tampering, then admitting he knew, but saying Isabel forced him to go along with it. He's clearly terrified of his sister. Detective Albright asks if Bella is ready to give her official statement yet. I look around and see Bella sitting in a corner with a woman I don't recognize, someone the venue called in. Sarah says that's a crisis counselor and that Bella needs time to process before she can give a coherent statement. The detective nods and says he'll wait, that he has enough to hold Isabel overnight anyway based on the medication evidence and the forged documents. My parents decide to take Bella home with them for the night because she can't face going back to the apartment she shared with Barrett. I ride with them, and we make a stop at Bella's place to grab some clothes and toiletries. My mom goes inside with Bella while my dad and I wait in the car. They're gone for 20 minutes. When they come back, Bella is carrying a small bag and moving like a robot, just going through motions without really being present. She gets in the back seat next to me and stares out the window. She hasn't cried yet, which worries me more than if she was sobbing. It's like she's shut down completely, her brain protecting itself from the enormity of what happened by just going numb. My mom keeps looking back at her with this concerned expression. At my parents' house, my mom sets Bella up in my old bedroom and brings her tea that Bella doesn't drink. She just sits on the bed staring at the wall. That night, I can't sleep. I keep replaying everything that happened, seeing Isabel's calm face as she manipulated everyone, seeing Bella's blank expression. Around 2 a.m., I give up on sleeping, and remember we grabbed Bella's laptop from her apartment. I get it from where my mom left it on the kitchen counter and bring it to my room. Bella gave me permission to look through anything that might be evidence. I open it and start searching through folders. There's one labeled Therapy Progress, and my heart starts beating faster. Inside are dozens of audio files, each one labeled with a date. I plug in headphones and start with the oldest file from 3 months ago. Isabel's voice comes through, professional and soothing. Bella is talking about wedding stress and Isabel is responding, but as I listen, I realize what Isabel is doing. She's taking every normal concern and twisting it, planting seeds of doubt and paranoia. Bella mentions she's worried I'm upset about not being maid of honor. Isabel suggests maybe I'm secretly in love with Barrett. Maybe I'm trying to sabotage the wedding. Bella sounds uncertain, saying that doesn't sound like me. Isabel says that's exactly what someone in denial would think. I feel sick listening to this. I move to another file from a month ago. Bella says Barrett seems distant lately. Isabel says that's normal for men before marriage, but maybe Bella should check his phone just to ease her anxiety, that there's nothing wrong with wanting reassurance. I can hear how Isabel is systematically destroying Bella's ability to trust her own judgment, making her doubt everything and everyone. I keep listening to more recordings, jumping between different dates. 3 weeks ago, Isabel asks Bella about wedding planning stress, and when Bella says she's excited but a little overwhelmed, Isabel pivots smoothly to asking if I've been supportive, or if maybe I've been adding to the stress. Bella defends me at first, says I've been great, but Isabel plants this tiny seed about how sometimes best friends get jealous during major life transitions. 2 weeks later, in another recording, Bella brings up that same concern unprompted, asking Isabel if it's normal to feel like your best friend is pulling away. Isabel tells her that distance often means something deeper, that maybe I'm processing complicated feelings about the wedding. Every session follows the same pattern, Isabel taking normal worries and twisting them into paranoia, making Bella doubt everything she knows about the people who love her. I find a recording from just 10 days before the wedding where Bella sounds completely different, her voice shaky and uncertain, asking Isabel if she should uninvite me entirely because she's so worried I'll cause problems. Isabel responds with fake concern, saying that might be extreme, but maybe limiting my role would be safer. Maybe having me as just a regular bridesmaid instead of maid of honor would reduce the risk. I pull off my headphones feeling sick, realizing Isabel spent months systematically destroying Bella's trust in me, building toward that moment at the wedding when Bella would believe I betrayed her. I open Bella's email next, searching for anything from Isabel. The inbox is full of messages going back 6 months, way more frequent than normal doctor-patient communication. I find the medication emails Sarah mentioned, and she's right. Isabel adjusted dosages almost every single week. The emails are phrased professionally, talking about managing anxiety symptoms and optimizing treatment, but the frequency is completely abnormal. I screenshot every single email, organizing them chronologically in a folder on my desktop. Then I find something else, a series of emails about insurance and billing, and I notice Isabel never billed Bella's insurance company directly. She always requested cash payments, claiming it would be easier for Bella's records, which now seems like an obvious red flag that Isabel was hiding something. I keep digging through folders, finding saved chat logs, appointment schedules, even grocery lists that mention picking up prescriptions. By 4 a.m., I have 30 pages of documentation, every piece of evidence organized by date and category, showing a clear pattern of psychological manipulation, medical malpractice, and deliberate isolation tactics. My eyes burn from staring at the screen, but I can't stop, knowing this documentation might be the key to putting Isabel in prison. Morning light filters through my bedroom curtains, and I hear my mom's footsteps in the hallway. I didn't sleep at all, just kept working through the evidence until my laptop battery died and I had to plug it back in. Sarah arrives around 9, earlier than I expected, carrying coffee and looking concerned when she sees my face. I must look terrible because she immediately asks if I slept, and I just shake my head and pull up the document I created. She sits next to me on my bed, setting her coffee aside and starts reading through everything. Her expression changes as she scrolls, going from concerned to impressed to angry as she sees the full scope of what Isabel did. She tells me this is exactly what prosecutors need. That systematic documentation like this makes it almost impossible for defense attorneys to claim isolated incidents or misunderstandings. We go through it together, Sarah asking questions about specific emails and recordings, making sure I captured everything correctly. She explains that we're building a case for multiple crimes now, not just the fraud and identity theft from the wedding. Medical malpractice for the medication tampering, conspiracy for the coordinated scheme with Barrett, identity theft for stealing my credit card information, and possibly even kidnapping if we can prove Isabel was holding Bella against her will through psychological and chemical manipulation. Sarah pulls out her phone and starts making calls, first to Detective Albright to set up a meeting, then to someone she calls a forensic psychiatrist who can review the therapy recordings and provide expert testimony about the manipulation tactics. She hangs up and looks at me seriously, saying we have a meeting with Detective Albright this afternoon to present everything. Then she suggests something that makes my stomach drop, asking if I'd be willing to call Tom's sister May to see if her experience matches the pattern we're seeing. I hesitate because calling a stranger about something this traumatic feels intrusive, but Sarah explains that if May's story matches, it proves Isabel has done this before, which strengthens our case significantly. I agree, knowing it's important even though I'm nervous. Sarah gives me space, heading downstairs to talk with my parents, and I find Tom's number in my recent calls and text him asking for May's contact information. He responds within minutes, sending me her number and a message saying she's expecting my call, that he already told her what happened at the wedding. I step outside into my parents' backyard, needing fresh air and privacy, and dial the number with shaking hands. May answers on the third ring, her voice cautious but kind, and I can tell she's bracing herself for a difficult conversation. I introduce myself, explaining who I am and what happened at the wedding, trying to keep my voice steady. There's a long silence on the other end, long enough that I think maybe the call dropped, but then May speaks quietly and says, "Oh God, he found another one." Those words hit me hard because they confirm this isn't random, that Isabel and Barrett have hurt multiple people. We talk for almost an hour, May describing what happened to her 3 years ago, and her story is so similar to Bella's that it makes my skin crawl. Isabel posed as a therapist specializing in trauma recovery. Barrett played the devoted boyfriend who seemed too good to be true. They isolated May from her friends and family by making her doubt everyone's intentions, drained her bank accounts through various schemes and fake emergencies, and then disappeared after filing a fraudulent insurance claim that made May look mentally unstable. May's voice breaks several times as she talks, and I can hear how much pain this still causes her even years later. She describes the medication Isabel gave her, the therapy sessions that left her feeling more confused instead of better, the way Barrett would be so loving and supportive while simultaneously helping his sister destroy May's life. I ask questions carefully, not wanting to push too hard, and May tells me she tried to report everything to police 3 years ago. But Isabel had documented everything so carefully, creating a paper trail that made May look paranoid and mentally ill, and without other victims coming forward, it was just her word against a licensed therapist. The police investigated but ultimately didn't pursue charges, and May eventually gave up trying to get justice because the legal process was almost as traumatic as what Isabel and Barrett did to her. She focused on surviving, rebuilding her life piece by piece, trying to move forward even though she never got closure. Then she asks about Bella, wanting to know if she's okay, and I hear genuine concern in her voice that makes me want to cry. Even after everything May went through, even after Isabel and Barrett destroyed her life and got away with it, she still cares about other victims and wants to help if she can. I explain that Bella is staying with my parents, that she's off the fake medications now and starting to process everything, that we have a lawyer who believes us and evidence that might actually lead to charges this time. May is quiet for a long moment, and I can hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she asks if I think it would help if she gave a statement to police about what happened to her. I tell her honestly that Sarah thinks having another victim with a matching story would be huge for the case, but I also understand if it's too hard to go through that again. May is silent for what feels like forever, and I wait, giving her space to decide. She says yes, but only if it will actually help this time, because going through the legal system before nearly broke her, and she can't do that again unless it leads somewhere. I promise her that we have more evidence now, that Sarah is really good at her job and actually believes us, that Detective Albright seems to be taking this seriously. May agrees to call the detective, and I give her his direct number that Sarah shared with me. Before we hang up, May tells me to take care of Bella, to remind her that none of this is her fault, that Isabel is really good at making people doubt themselves, but that doesn't mean those doubts are real. That afternoon, I ride with Sarah to the police station, my laptop bag heavy with all the evidence we've compiled. Detective Albright meets us in a conference room, and he's brought another detective with him who specializes in financial crimes. Sarah sets up her laptop and walks them through everything methodically, starting with the therapy recordings that show Isabel's manipulation tactics, then the emails documenting the medication tampering, then my credit card statements showing the fraudulent hotel charge, then the security footage from my parents' house showing someone breaking into our mailbox at 3 a.m. She presents May's willingness to testify about her similar experience, explaining how the pattern matches almost exactly. Detective Albright takes notes constantly, his expression getting more serious as Sarah continues. When she finishes, he sits back and says he's genuinely shocked at the scope of what we've uncovered in less than 24 hours. The financial crimes detective asks technical questions about the credit card fraud and the timing of various transactions, making notes about specific charges that need to be investigated. Detective Albright says he's going to request a full investigation with specialists for the financial crimes and medical fraud aspects, that this is way bigger than the initial incident at the wedding. He turns to me and asks if I'm willing to make a formal statement about the false accusations against me. I say yes immediately, wanting everything on record. He pulls out a recording device and starts walking me through what happened over the past 6 weeks, asking detailed questions about every interaction. I describe the phone call where Bella supposedly told me to wear white, how clear the conversation was, how she sent me a photo of the dress and gave me a thumbs up. I explain about arriving at the wedding and discovering everyone else in blue, about Bella's accusation that I was trying to sabotage her, about the hotel receipt with my name and signature that I never signed. As I'm talking, laying out the timeline of Isabel's scheme, I realize how carefully she planned every single detail to make me look guilty and to isolate Bella from her strongest support system. If I hadn't been there that day, if Tom hadn't exposed Barrett and Isabel, Bella would have gone through with the wedding believing I betrayed her, and Isabel would have had complete control. Detective Albright slides the hotel receipt across the table, the same one Isabel presented at the wedding as proof of my supposed affair with Barrett. I pick it up and examine it more carefully than I did in the chaos of that day. The signature is close to mine. Someone clearly tried to copy my handwriting, but there are small differences I notice now. The way the I is dotted is wrong. I always dot mine directly above, but this one is slightly to the right. The loop on my Y is different too, more rounded than how I actually write. Sarah leans over and points out that handwriting analysis could prove it's a forgery, and Detective Albright nods, saying he'll send it to their document examiner today. Every piece of evidence feels like another nail in Isabel's coffin, proof that she didn't just manipulate Bella emotionally, but created an elaborate scheme with forged documents and stolen financial information. For the first time since the wedding, I feel something like hope building in my chest, the possibility that we might actually get justice, and that Isabel might actually face real consequences for destroying people's lives. 2 days pass before Sarah calls me with news about a digital forensics expert. Her name is Jade Chopra, and she specializes in recovering deleted data from phones. Sarah hired her to look at my phone and try to find the missing text messages with Bella about the white dress. I drive to Sarah's office that afternoon, my stomach tight with nerves about whether this will actually work. Jade is younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a messy bun and wearing a t-shirt with some coding joke I don't understand. She greets me with this huge smile and immediately starts talking about data recovery like it's the coolest thing in the world. She explains that when messages get deleted, they don't actually disappear right away. The phone just marks that space as available for new data, but the old information is still there in the backup files until something overwrites it. She says there's a good chance she can recover the conversation if I haven't used my phone too much since the deletion. I hand over my phone and she plugs it into her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she runs different programs. Sarah offers me coffee and I sit on her office couch trying not to watch Jade work because it makes me too anxious. Instead, I scroll through social media on Sarah's tablet and see that people are still talking about the wedding disaster. Someone posted a blurry photo of me in the white dress surrounded by bridesmaids in blue, and the comments are brutal. Half the people think I'm a psycho who tried to upstage the bride, and the other half think something weird was going on. I close the tablet before I can read more. 3 hours go by, and I'm starting to lose hope when Jade suddenly calls me over to her laptop. My heart starts pounding as I walk across the office. She turns the screen toward me, and there it is. The entire text conversation with Bella from 6 weeks ago. I can see the photo of my white slip dress that I sent, and right below it is Bella's response with a thumbs up emoji. And the words, "Perfect, that's exactly the look we're going for." The timestamp shows exactly when it was sent, and Jade points out that the metadata proves the image wasn't edited or altered in any way. I actually start crying right there in Sarah's office, these huge gulping sobs that I can't control. Sarah puts her arm around me, and Jade looks uncomfortable but pleased with herself. This is proof. Real, actual proof that I'm not crazy, that I didn't imagine or misremember what happened. Bella really did tell me to wear white, and someone deleted the evidence to make me look guilty. Sarah immediately emails the recovered messages to Detective Albright while I'm still wiping my eyes. Within 20 minutes, he calls back and confirms they're comparing the recovered data to Bella's phone records. He says Bella's phone shows no record of that conversation at all, which means someone with serious technical skills deliberately deleted it from her device. Jade leans back in her chair and explains that this level of data manipulation isn't something you can do by accident. It requires either physical access to the phone for an extended period or sophisticated remote access software. Either way, it points to serious premeditation. Someone planned this whole setup carefully, knew exactly how to erase the evidence, and timed it perfectly to make me look guilty at the wedding. Sarah asks if Jade can determine when the messages were deleted from Bella's phone, and Jade says she'd need to examine Bella's actual device to figure that out. Detective Albright says he'll request Bella's phone as evidence and have their tech people look at it. I feel this weird mix of relief and anger. Relief that I have proof I'm telling the truth, but anger that someone went to such elaborate lengths to destroy my reputation and my friendship with Bella. The next morning, Detective Albright calls Sarah with more news. A pharmacist contacted him after seeing local news coverage about the case. The pharmacist works at the pharmacy where Bella's prescriptions were filled, and he remembered something odd about how those prescriptions were handled. When we get to the police station, the pharmacist is already there giving his statement. He's an older guy with gray hair and glasses, and he looks genuinely upset about his role in what happened. He explains that Dr. Emma Harley, who we now know is actually Isabel, always paid cash for Bella's medications instead of using insurance. That wasn't necessarily weird since some people prefer to keep mental health medications private, but what was strange was that Isabel insisted on picking up the medications herself, rather than having Bella collect them. The pharmacist thought it was unusual but not illegal, since therapists sometimes help patients who have trouble managing their medications. He filled the prescriptions exactly as written, genuine anti-anxiety medication in the correct dosage. But now he realizes that Isabel was probably switching the pills after she got them from the pharmacy, replacing the real medication with something else. Detective Albright asks if the pharmacist kept records of exactly what he dispensed, and the pharmacist nods and pulls out copies of the prescription logs. Every medication he gave Isabel was legitimate, which means the fake pills in Bella's bottles came from Isabel's manipulation after the fact. Sarah asks how often Isabel picked up medications, and the pharmacist checks his records. Almost every 2 weeks for the past 3 months, way more frequently than normal for anxiety medication. Most prescriptions last at least a month, but Isabel was coming in constantly to get refills, claiming Bella was going through them quickly due to wedding stress. The pharmacist admits he should have questioned it more, should have insisted on talking to Bella directly, but Isabel was so professional and convincing that he never suspected anything was wrong. 2 days later, the lab results come back on the pills from Bella's medication bottles. Detective Albright calls a meeting at Sarah's office to go over the findings, and what he tells us makes my blood run cold. The pills contain a mix of hormones and mild sedatives, nothing like the anti-anxiety medication that was prescribed. The lab technician found estrogen, progesterone, and a sedative called lorazepam, all mixed together in doses that were carefully measured. Sarah explains that this combination would cause exactly the symptoms Bella experienced over the past few months. The hormones would mess with her emotional regulation, making her mood swings worse and her reactions more intense. The sedatives would make her foggy and confused, less able to think clearly or trust her own judgment. Together, they created a state where Bella was paranoid, emotionally unstable, and unable to distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. Sarah calls it chemical gaslighting, making someone doubt their own mind by literally changing their brain chemistry. The dosages were calculated carefully enough to cause problems without being immediately dangerous or obvious. If Bella had gone to a regular doctor complaining about these symptoms, they probably would have just adjusted her anxiety medication, never suspecting she was being deliberately poisoned. Isabel knew exactly what she was doing, had probably done research on how to manipulate someone's mental state through medication. Detective Albright says this elevates the charges significantly. We're not just talking about fraud anymore, but about deliberately drugging someone without their consent, which is a serious felony. He's working with the prosecutor to figure out all the charges they can bring against Isabel. I think about Bella taking those pills every day, trusting that they would help her feel better, when really they were making everything worse. I think about how Isabel sat in therapy sessions with Bella, listening to her describe the exact symptoms the fake medication was causing, and pretended to adjust her treatment while actually just continuing the poisoning. It's one of the most evil things I can imagine, using medical knowledge to hurt someone who trusted you completely. 4 days after the wedding, Bella finally feels ready to give her statement to the police. She calls me the night before and asks if I'll come with her for support. Her voice sounds different from it did at the wedding, clearer and more like herself. She says being off Isabel's fake medications for a few days has helped her think more clearly, though she still feels foggy sometimes. I pick her up at my parents' house the next morning and we drive to the police station together. Bella is quiet in the car, staring out the window, and I don't push her to talk. When we get there, Detective Albright takes us to a private interview room and explains that Bella can take breaks whenever she needs them. A victim advocate is there too, a kind woman who sits next to Bella and reminds her that she's safe now. Bella starts talking slowly at first, describing how she found Isabel's name online when searching for therapists who specialized in pre-wedding anxiety. Isabel's website looked professional, had good reviews that Bella now realizes were probably fake, and offered a free first consultation. From the very first session, Isabel was understanding and supportive, exactly what Bella needed. She talked about how normal it was to feel stressed about marriage, how common it was to have doubts about big life changes. Then gradually, over weeks and months, Isabel started planting different ideas. She'd ask questions about me, about whether Bella felt secure in our friendship, about whether she ever worried I might have feelings for Barrett. At first, Bella brushed those questions off, but Isabel kept bringing them up in subtle ways, until Bella started wondering if maybe there was something to worry about. The medication started about 3 months ago, and that's when things got really bad. Bella describes feeling disconnected from reality, like she was watching her life happen to someone else. Her emotions felt too big, too intense, and she couldn't figure out why. She'd have panic attacks about things that never bothered her before, like me not responding to a text right away, or Barrett working late. Isabel always had an explanation that made Bella doubt her own perceptions. She'd say the panic attacks meant Bella needed a higher dose of medication, or that the paranoid thoughts were actually Bella's intuition trying to warn her about real problems. Every therapy session made Bella feel crazier instead of better, but Isabel convinced her that was part of the healing process. Bella's voice breaks when she talks about how she pushed me away, how she believed I was trying to sabotage her wedding and steal her fiancé. She says she knew deep down that didn't make sense, that I would never do that, but the medication and Isabel's constant manipulation made her doubt everything she knew about our friendship. While Bella is giving her statement, she suddenly stops mid-sentence and her eyes go wide. She remembers something about paperwork from her first therapy session with Isabel. Detective Albright leans forward and asks her to explain. Bella says Isabel had her sign a bunch of forms during that first meeting, supposedly just standard intake documents and insurance paperwork. Bella was nervous and distracted, and she didn't read them carefully because Isabel was a licensed therapist, and Bella trusted her as a medical professional. Isabel explained each form quickly, saying things like, "This is just for my records," and "This is required by the licensing board," and Bella signed everything without really looking. Detective Albright's eyes widen and he asks if Bella has copies of those documents. Bella thinks for a moment and then says they should be in her email because Isabel sent PDFs of everything for her records. She pulls out her phone right there in the police station and starts searching through her email. It takes a few minutes because there are hundreds of messages, but finally she finds the email from Isabel sent 3 months ago with the subject line, "Therapy Intake Documents." There are 5 PDF attachments. Sarah moves her chair closer so she can see Bella's phone screen too. They open the first document and it's a standard medical history form. The second is an insurance information sheet. The third appears to be a consent for treatment form. But when Sarah opens the 4th document, her face goes completely pale. She asks Bella to forward all the emails to her immediately, and then she starts reading out loud. Hidden among the therapy paperwork is a power of attorney document giving Isabel authority to make medical and financial decisions for Bella if she's ever deemed mentally incompetent. The language is dense and legal, Exactly the kind of thing someone would skip over if they thought they were just signing therapy intake forms. The fifth document is even worse, a prenuptial agreement that Bella has no memory of signing. It states that in case of divorce or death, all of Bella's assets, including her trust fund, would go to Barrett. The signature on both documents looks like Bella's handwriting, but Bella swears she never knowingly signed anything like this. Sarah takes photos of every page with her own phone while Detective Albright calls the prosecutor. Sarah studies the documents for a long time before speaking. She finally says that these papers are probably not legally valid since they were obtained under false pretenses and hidden among legitimate therapy forms. But that's not really the point. The point is that these documents show Isabel's full plan, the complete scope of what she was trying to do. If the wedding had happened and Bella had stayed on the fake medications, Isabel could have used that power of attorney to have Bella committed to a psychiatric facility. With a therapist's documentation of Bella's supposed mental illness and legal authority to make medical decisions, Isabel could have had Bella locked up indefinitely. Meanwhile, the prenuptial agreement would have given Barrett access to all of Bella's money, including the trust fund she's set to inherit when she turns 25 next month. They could have drained everything, left Bella with nothing, and she would have been trapped in a psychiatric hospital, unable to fight back. Sarah says this goes way beyond fraud or even the medication tampering. This is conspiracy to commit kidnapping, to steal someone's entire life and identity. Detective Albright adds that the forged signatures on legal documents are additional felony charges. Every piece of evidence we find makes the case against Isabel stronger, but it also makes me realize how close Bella came to losing everything. If Tom hadn't exposed Barrett and Isabel at the wedding, if we hadn't found all this evidence, Bella might be in a psychiatric hospital right now while Isabel and Barrett spent her money. The thought makes me feel sick. Detective Albright tells us something else that makes the whole situation even bigger than we thought. His team has been investigating Isabel and Barrett's background, and they've located 2 more potential victims from their past. Both women had experiences that match the same pattern we're seeing with Bella. They met Barrett, started relationships with him, began seeing Isabel for therapy, got put on medications that made them unstable, and then had their finances drained before Barrett disappeared. Neither woman reported what happened to them because they were too ashamed or didn't think anyone would believe them. Isabel had documented everything to make them look mentally ill, and without proof or other victims coming forward, it was just their word against a licensed therapist. But now that the news is covering Bella's case, both women saw the reports and contacted the police. They're willing to give statements now that they know they weren't alone, now that they have proof this was a systematic pattern of abuse rather than isolated incidents. Sarah explains that having multiple victims with the same pattern is huge for the criminal case. It shows this wasn't a one-time mistake or misunderstanding, but a deliberate scheme that Isabel and Barrett ran multiple times. Prosecutors love pattern evidence because it makes it much harder for the defense to claim coincidence or misunderstanding. Each victim corroborates the others, and together they paint a clear picture of intentional criminal behavior. Detective Albright says he's setting up interviews with both women over the next few days, and he asks if Bella would be willing to meet them eventually. Bella nods slowly and says she'd like that it might help to talk to other people who understand what she went through. I squeeze her hand and think about how many lives Isabel destroyed, how many women she manipulated and drugged and robbed. The scope of her crimes is so much bigger than any of us realized at first. 3 days after meeting Kalani and finding the other victims, Sarah's office phone rang. She put it on speaker. A man introduced himself as Raphael Riggs from the State Licensing Board. He said they were investigating Isabel's credentials after receiving our complaint. His voice sounded tired, like he'd been working on this case for days without sleep. Sarah grabbed a notepad and started writing everything down. Raphael explained that Isabel's therapy license was real, but it was obtained under a different name. The educational credentials from her PhD program couldn't be verified. The university she claimed to attend had no record of anyone matching her description in their graduate psychology program during those years. Sarah asked what that meant legally. Raphael said it looked like identity theft on top of everything else. Isabel might have stolen someone else's academic records to get licensed. That added professional fraud to her growing list of crimes. I felt sick thinking about how many systems Isabel had manipulated to hurt people. She didn't just lie to Bella and the other victims. She lied to the entire licensing board, to the state, to every person who trusted her because of those credentials on her wall. Raphael said he was coordinating with Detective Albright to share evidence. The licensing board would be revoking Isabel's license immediately, but the criminal charges were more important now. Sarah thanked him and hung up. She looked at me and Bella, who had come to the office that morning for updates. Bella asked what happens to all the other patients Isabel was seeing, the ones who weren't part of her schemes. Sarah said the licensing board would contact them and help them transfer to legitimate therapists. Some of those people probably had real mental health issues and trusted Isabel to help them. Now they'd find out their therapist was a fraud. 2 days later, Sarah got an email that made her eyebrows shoot up. She read it twice before telling us what it said. Barrett's lawyer wanted to set up a private meeting. Barrett wanted to explain his side of the story. Sarah looked skeptical when she told us. She said it could be useful if Barrett was willing to testify against Isabel, but it could also be a trap, or a way to gather information about our case. I asked what we should do. Sarah said we should meet with him at her office, with the clear understanding that anything Barrett said could be used as evidence. She'd record the whole conversation with his lawyer's permission. Bella went pale when Sarah suggested she should be there too. She hadn't seen Barrett since the wedding day, hadn't heard his voice except in her nightmares. But she nodded slowly and said she needed to hear what he had to say. We scheduled the meeting for the next afternoon. That night I barely slept, wondering what Barrett could possibly say that would make any of this make sense. Barrett showed up at Sarah's office looking terrible. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. His lawyer walked next to him, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. Sarah had set up chairs in her conference room. Bella and I sat on one side of the table, Sarah next to us with her recording equipment ready. Barrett and his lawyer sat across from us. Barrett opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah cut him off immediately. She said we weren't here for apologies, we were here for information. Barrett's lawyer shifted in his seat but didn't object. Barrett nodded and started talking. His voice shook as he explained how Isabel had controlled his life since they were teenagers. Their parents died when Barrett was 15 and Isabel was 20. She became his legal guardian. That's when it started, he said. She told him what to wear, who to talk to, what to study in the school. When he tried to leave her schemes, she threatened to hurt herself or report him to police for crimes he didn't commit. She had documents, fake evidence, whole stories prepared to destroy him if he didn't cooperate. I watched Bella's face as Barrett talked. She sat completely still, her hands folded on the table, staring at him like she was trying to see inside his head and figure out if any of this was true. Barrett kept going, his words coming faster now like he couldn't stop. He admitted he knew Isabel was drugging Bella and manipulating her. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, trying to get him to slow down, but Barrett shook him off. No, he said Isabel told him they were just going to get married, access Bella's trust fund that she'd inherit at 25, and then divorce quietly. Split the money and move on. He claimed he didn't know about the power of attorney documents or the plan to have Bella committed to a psychiatric facility. He said he found out about that part on the wedding day, right before everything exploded. That's why he looked so shocked when Tom started revealing everything. His lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He kept trying to stop Barrett from talking, but Barrett seemed desperate to get everything out. He said he never wanted to hurt Bella, that he actually cared about her at first before Isabel got her claws in deeper. Sarah wrote notes the whole time, her pen moving fast across the page. I couldn't tell if she believed him or not. Her face stayed neutral, professional. I finally spoke up and asked Barrett about the other victims. My voice came out harder than I expected. I asked how many women he'd helped Isabel destroy. Barrett's face crumpled and he started crying, actual tears running down his face. He said he'd been part of Isabel's schemes for 7 years. There were at least 5 women that he knew of, maybe more that Isabel never told him about. He described how Isabel picked her targets. She always chose women who were vulnerable, usually after a major loss or life change. Someone who'd lost a parent, gone through a bad divorce, moved to a new city where they didn't have support systems. And she targeted people with assets or family money. Never enough to attract serious attention, but enough to make the schemes worthwhile. Barrett said Isabel was brilliant at finding these women, at figuring out exactly what they needed emotionally, and then providing it while slowly draining everything they had. He claimed he was also a victim of Isabel's manipulation, that she'd been grooming him since he was a kid to be her partner in these crimes. Sarah put down her pen and looked at him directly. She said he was an adult who made choices. He chose to help Isabel hurt people. He chose to profit from their pain. Being manipulated by his sister didn't erase the harm he caused. Barrett nodded and kept crying. He said he knew that he deserved whatever punishment came. But he wanted to help stop Isabel now, wanted to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. Barrett's lawyer finally managed to get control of the conversation. He said Barrett was willing to cooperate fully with prosecutors. He positioned this as evidence that Barrett deserved leniency, that he was taking responsibility and trying to make things right. Sarah said she'd pass everything to the prosecutor, but she wasn't making any promises about deals or reduced charges. That wasn't her decision to make. The meeting ended after almost 2 hours. Barrett and his lawyer left through Sarah's front door. Bella and I stayed in the conference room. Sarah closed her notebook and looked at us. She said Barrett's testimony was valuable but complicated. He was both a victim of his sister's abuse and a willing participant in hurting others. The legal system would have to figure out how to balance those things. Bella asked if Sarah believed him. Sarah said parts of his story rang true, especially about Isabel's control starting when he was young. But that didn't excuse his choices as an adult. He could have walked away, reported Isabel, warned the victims. He didn't do any of that until he got caught. I asked what happens next. Sarah said she'd send the recording to Detective Albright and the prosecutor. They'd decide if Barrett's cooperation was worth a plea deal. A week after the wedding that never happened, May drove into town to meet with us in person. Detective Albright had arranged for her to give her formal statement at the police station. Sarah picked her up from her hotel and brought her to a coffee shop where Bella and I were waiting. May walked in looking nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she approached our table. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. When she saw Bella, something shifted in her face. They looked at each other for a long moment, then Bella stood up and they hugged. Neither of them said anything. They just held on to each other like they were the only two people in the world who understood what the other had been through. I felt tears in my eyes watching them. After a few minutes, they sat down and we talked for an hour before heading to the police station. May asked Bella questions about Isabel's tactics, about the medications, about how Barrett acted. Every answer Bella gave made May nod like she was checking off boxes in her head. Later, after May finished her statement with Detective Albright, she told me something that stuck with me. She said meeting another survivor who believed her was more healing than 3 years of therapy. Isabel had made her doubt whether any of it really happened the way she remembered. Having Bella confirm that yes, this was real, these things actually happened, it gave May back her sense of reality. The next day, Detective Albright called Sarah and said the prosecutor wanted to meet with all the victims together. His name was Alejandro Langley. Sarah said he was known for taking on complicated fraud cases. The meeting was set for that Friday at the prosecutor's office downtown. When we arrived, there was a conference room with Bella, me, May, Kalani, and the 2 other women who'd come forward after seeing the news coverage. 6 victims total, all of us sitting around a table while Alejandro explained what charges they were filing. He was tall, maybe 40, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He spoke clearly, making sure we understood everything. Isabel was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, medical malpractice, identity theft, forgery, and unlawful administration of controlled substances. Each charge carried serious prison time. Barrett was charged with conspiracy and fraud, but Alejandro acknowledged that his level of guilt was different from Isabel's. The evidence showed Isabel's long-term psychological control over Barrett, which complicated things. Alejandro said he wanted to be honest with us about how the legal system worked. Some of us would have stronger cases than others based on the evidence available. But together, the pattern of behavior was undeniable. Alejandro explained that they were offering Barrett a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for full cooperation and testimony against Isabel. The victims got to give input on whether they supported the deal. It wasn't our final decision, but Alejandro said he valued our perspective. The room got quiet. Kalani spoke first. She said she wanted Barrett to face full consequences for what he did, but she wanted Isabel in prison more. If Barrett's testimony made that more likely, she could live with a plea deal. May agreed. She said Isabel was the mastermind, the one who would do this again if given the chance. Barrett was dangerous too, but in a different way. The other victims nodded. When it was my turn, I said part of me wanted Barrett to suffer for what he put Bella through. But the practical part knew his testimony might be the key to making sure Isabel got the maximum sentence. Bella was the last to speak. She said she didn't know if she'd ever forgive Barrett, but she understood that the legal system required trade-offs sometimes. If his testimony helped convict Isabel, she wouldn't stand in the way of the plea deal. Alejandro thanked us and said he'd take our input seriously when finalizing the agreement. 2 weeks after the wedding, Isabel was arrested at her office while seeing a patient. Detective Albright told us later that they'd coordinated with building security to make sure no one got hurt. Isabel had been in the middle of a therapy session when 2 officers walked in and read her rights. The patient had to be escorted out by another officer, completely confused about what was happening. The news picked up the story that same day. It was unusual enough to get serious coverage. A therapist systematically drugging and defrauding her patients with help from her brother. The local news ran it first, then it got picked up by regional stations. By that evening, our names were in the public record. Sarah had warned us this would happen, that court documents were public and reporters would find the details. It felt weird seeing my name on TV, hearing anchors talk about what happened at the wedding. But Sarah said the publicity might help other victims come forward who hadn't reported yet. She was right. Within 3 days, Detective Albright got calls from 3 more women saying they'd had similar experiences with a therapist named Emma Harley, or variations of that name. The pattern Detective Albright described made my stomach turn. 3 more women called within a week of Isabel's arrest, each one describing similar experiences with therapists using variations of Emma Harley's name. One woman said her therapist went by Emma Morris. Another remembered Emma Morrissey. The third had seen someone named Emily Harley. Detective Albright spread their statements across Sarah's conference table, and I read through them while Bella sat next to me, gripping my hand so tight my fingers went numb. The earliest case dated back 10 years, which meant Isabel had been doing this long before Barrett got involved. She'd perfected her system over a decade, learning exactly how to manipulate vulnerable women, how to isolate them from support systems, how to drain their resources while making them think they were losing their minds. The detective said they were looking into even older cases now, checking therapy licensing records and cross-referencing them with fraud complaints that were dismissed at the time because the victims seemed mentally unstable. Sarah asked how many total victims there might be, and Detective Albright said conservatively they were looking at 15 to 20 women over the past decade, though some might never come forward because Isabel had convinced them they were too mentally ill to be believed. Bella started seeing a new therapist named Lila McCoy 2 weeks after the wedding that didn't happen. I drove her to the first appointment because she was shaking so badly she couldn't hold the steering wheel. She sat in my passenger seat staring at the building like it might explode, and I had to remind her 3 times that Lila came recommended by Sarah, that we'd verified her credentials through multiple sources, that she specialized in helping people recover from exactly what Isabel had done. Bella went inside alone because Lila said it was important for her to take that step herself, and I waited in the parking lot for the full hour checking my phone every 30 seconds. When Bella came out, her eyes were red, but she looked calmer than I'd seen her in weeks. She told me Lila spent the first session just explaining how real therapy worked, what boundaries looked like, how informed consent was supposed to happen. Lila gave Bella a written document outlining their therapeutic relationship and told her she could take it home, think about it, ask questions, and decide if she wanted to continue. Everything Isabel had never done. Bella clutched that document in the car like it was proof that reality still existed, that not every therapist was a predator, that she could learn to trust her own judgment again. A month after everything fell apart, I finally went back to my apartment 6 hours away. I'd been staying with my parents, helping Bella, meeting with lawyers, giving statements to police. My landlord had been understanding about the rent, and my boss at the marketing firm where I worked had given me emergency leave, but I couldn't avoid my real life forever. I drove back on a Tuesday morning and the whole trip felt strange, like I was watching someone else's life from outside my body. My apartment looked exactly the same but felt completely different. The coffee mug I'd left in the sink the morning of the wedding was still there, dried coffee stains at the bottom. My white dress hung in the bathroom where I'd left it after packing for the wedding, and seeing it made my throat close up. I'd been so focused on helping Bella and building the case against Isabel that I hadn't processed my own trauma. Standing in front of everyone in that white dress while they screamed accusations at me. Having my credit card stolen, my identity used to create fake evidence. Watching people I'd known for years believe I was capable of betraying my best friend. I sat on my couch and called Sarah, asked if she could recommend a therapist for me too. She gave me 3 names and told me it was smart to get help now instead of waiting for the trauma to catch up with me later. 6 weeks after the wedding, we all gathered at the courthouse for Isabel's preliminary hearing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look pale and tired. May sat 2 rows behind us with Tom, and the other 3 new victims were scattered around the room, not quite ready to sit together yet. Detective Albright stood near the prosecutor's table reviewing notes, and Sarah sat between me and Bella, her legal pad covered in organized bullet points. When they brought Isabel in, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones sharp under skin that looked gray in the harsh lighting. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of the sleek professional style from the wedding, and she wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her frame. But her eyes were the same, cold and calculating as she scanned the courtroom. When her gaze landed on our section, her mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. Her lawyer, a tired-looking man in an expensive suit, started arguing that Isabel was a licensed professional providing legitimate care, that her patients were confused and possibly conspiring against her due to their mental health issues. He suggested we were all suffering from shared delusions, that the stress of the wedding had triggered some kind of mass hysteria. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table as the prosecutor stood up to respond. The prosecutor presented the lab results on Bella's medication, the financial records showing the fraudulent charges, the testimony from the pharmacist about Isabel's unusual behavior. He showed the forged hotel receipt with my signature, the recovered text messages from my phone, the security footage of someone breaking into my parents' mailbox. He played excerpts from the therapy recordings where Isabel systematically planted paranoid thoughts in Bella's mind. The evidence took 2 hours to present, and by the end, Isabel's lawyer had stopped objecting. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and reading glasses, reviewed the documents in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, she looked up at Isabel and said the evidence showed clear premeditation and systematic fraud. She called Isabel a danger to the community and a significant flight risk given her history of using false identities. Bail was denied. Isabel would remain in custody until trial. As the bailiffs moved to take her back to holding, Isabel turned in her seat and looked directly at me and Bella. Her lips moved, and even though I couldn't hear her over the noise in the courtroom, I could read the words she mouthed clearly. "This isn't over." My blood went cold, but Sarah's hand was already on my shoulder, solid and real. She leaned close and whispered that Isabel was going to prison, that she couldn't hurt anyone anymore, that this was just a desperate attempt to maintain control. I wanted to believe her. Barrett's sentencing hearing happened 3 weeks after Isabel's preliminary hearing. He'd taken the plea deal Alejandro offered, agreeing to testify against Isabel in exchange for reduced charges and probation instead of prison time. The courtroom was packed again, all the victims present to hear what he'd say. Barrett looked different too, thinner and older, with dark circles under his eyes. His lawyer stood next to him as he read from a prepared statement, his voice shaking. He apologized to each victim by name, including me and Bella. He explained how Isabel had groomed him starting when he was 14, right after their parents died in a car accident, and she became his legal guardian. She'd been 22 then, and she'd spent years teaching him that the world was full of people trying to take advantage of them, that they had to take what they could before others took from them. She'd trained him to play roles, to manipulate emotions, to see other people as marks instead of humans. His first involvement in one of her schemes was when he was 17, and by the time he was an adult, he didn't know how to exist outside the patterns she'd created. The judge listened without expression, then said that while Barrett's history of abuse was tragic, he was still an adult who'd made choices that hurt people. She sentenced him to 5 years probation, mandatory therapy, and community service. As they let him out, Barrett looked at Bella and I saw him mouth the word sorry. Bella just stared at him with no expression at all. 3 months after the wedding that never happened, Bella texted me asking if I wanted to get coffee. Not to discuss the case or meet with lawyers, just coffee like we used to do in college. I drove the 6 hours back to our hometown and met her at the place we'd gone to every Sunday morning during freshman year. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at our old table by the window, and seeing her in that familiar spot made my chest hurt. We ordered our usual drinks, and for the first few minutes we just sat there in awkward silence. There was so much between us now, so much hurt that couldn't be erased just because we'd figured out who the real villain was. She hadn't believed me when I swore I didn't sleep with Barrett. I hadn't recognized how much she was suffering under Isabel's manipulation, hadn't pushed harder to find out what was wrong. Finally, Bella said she was sorry for not believing me, and I said I was sorry for not seeing what was happening to her. We talked for 2 hours about everything, the deleted messages and the fake affair accusations and the white dress setup. We talked about how Isabel had systematically destroyed Bella's trust in her own perceptions, and how I'd felt watching everyone believe I was capable of betraying my best friend. It was painful and awkward and necessary, and by the end I felt like maybe we could rebuild something. Not the friendship we'd had before, which had been based partly on never questioning each other, but something stronger and more honest. Bella told me she'd been thinking about going back to the school to become a victim advocate, someone who helps people navigate the legal system after experiencing fraud and manipulation. She wanted to use what happened to her to help others who were going through similar situations. I told her I'd been thinking about law school, that watching Sarah work had shown me how much power lawyers have to get justice for people who've been hurt. Bella's eyes lit up and she said we should study for the LSAT together, make a plan for applications, support each other through the whole process. We spent another hour mapping out timelines and researching programs, and it felt like the first time since the wedding that we were looking forward instead of backward. As we were leaving the coffee shop, Bella stopped on the sidewalk and hugged me tight. She said thank you for not giving up on me even when I pushed you away. I hugged her back and told her that's what best friends do. We fight for each other, especially when someone's trying to tear us apart. For the first time since I put on that white dress and walked into the bridesmaid's room, I felt genuinely hopeful about our future. Not because everything was fixed or forgiven, but because we were both choosing to fight for our friendship instead of letting Isabel's manipulation be the thing that destroyed it. We walked to our cars in the late afternoon sun, and I realized that while Isabel had tried to take everything from us, she'd failed at the one thing that mattered most. She hadn't broken us.